In this lesson, we're going to cover configuration levels. As I already mentioned in the previous lesson, prior to Windows Server 2012, we had the option to install as either Server Core, which is this command prompt focused interface, no graphical shell, no Explorer, no Internet Explorer, no management tools, or we had what was called a full installation, or Server with a GUI in Windows Server 2012 terms. These two options are maintained in Windows Server 2012, but we also have an additional layer. So we have the Server Core lowest configuration level. This is the bare minimum set of operating system that must be installed. We then have something called Minimal Server Interface. You may see it referred to as MinWin. And this is Server Core with the management tools and management infrastructure installed. So there is still no graphical interface. There is still no Explorer.exe, still no Internet Explorer. There is no start screen. However, you do have access to Server Manager locally. You have access to MMC. You have access to all of the control panel applets. This is useful not only for a local administrator to log on to the box, but if you think about applications that may have dependencies on certain elements of the management infrastructure, by installing the server in this Minimal Server Interface version, you may be able to have applications functioning on this platform that typically would not run on Server Core, but it does get you away from having to run the full server with a GUI and all the Explorer and Internet Explorer components. At the top level, well, nearly at the top, we have Server with a GUI. This adds Explorer.exe, this adds Internet Explorer, and what you typically think of as a full server installation. Additionally, you see I have Desktop Experience shown. This has also been there in previous versions of Windows Server, and this adds a number of the desktop type enhancements, for example things like Windows Store to the environment. This would really only be used for a remote desktop session host where you're offering desktops to users remotely, and it may be required for some third-party applications that rely on components installed with Desktop Experience, for example some codecs used for multimedia rendering. Whereas in previous version, the option to go Server Core or Server with a GUI or full installation was set at installation time and could not be changed, in Windows Server 2012, the user interface elements are just an optional feature. So you can see here via Server Manager, I can say I can add roles and features, and I'm going to go into this in more detail in future lessons. I can select a server, and then it shows me the roles and features, and I just scroll down to user interfaces and infrastructure, and here you can see I can select. I could make this server a minimal server interface by just installing the graphical management tools and infrastructure. I could make it a server with a GUI by also selecting Server Graphical Shell. Note, it is not possible to install Server Graphical Shell without the graphical management tools. This has a reliance on that component, so if I select just Server Graphical Shell, it's also going to add the graphical management tools and infrastructure. I can also elect to install the Desktop Experience for that full desktop interface and capability set. Once I select the option I required, I would just click Next and it would complete that installation. And we will actually cover this in future lessons in detail. The important part is when I change these levels, the only action that is taken is to install the various components and then reboot the server. So I do require a reboot any time I change these user interfaces and infrastructure. So if I wanted to install the graphical management tools and infrastructure, after I click Next, it would remotely communicate to that box, and I can actually give it the option to automatically restart. It would enable those components and then reboot that server. When it came back, it would now have the graphical management tools and infrastructure available locally. So I could now run Server Manager, I could run MMC, I could run all of the various control panel applets, but I would still have no Explorer.exe, I would have no graphical shell, I would still have no Internet Explorer. And the key part there is I then don't have to patch those components. I don't have to reboot the server because of potential patches those components may have required. This concludes the lesson on configuration levels.